I'm Sarveshi Shukla, and you're listening to Chicago Indian Arts Podcast, a platform built by Jigar Shah with the belief that Indian arts, culture, literature deserve a serious home. I picked up The Henna Artist thinking I was reading a historical fiction. What I actually found was a question I couldn't stop turning over. What does it cost a woman to build her life entirely through self control? That question followed me through the entire trilogy into 6 Days of Bombay. 4 books, one long, serious argument about identity, freedom, and what we give away in order to survive. Our guest is the internationally best-selling author of Jaipur Trilogy and 6 Days in Bombay, a New York Times and USA Today bestseller, a Reese Witherspoon Book Club pick, a Grand Prix Roman Historique winner. Her work's been translated into 30 languages and is currently in development for screen, and has reached over 1,000 book clubs, literary festivals, universities across the globe. Forbes celebrated her as one of the 50 women shattering age and gender norms, and her 5th novel arrives in 2027. It's a genuine honor to welcome Alka Joshi.
Thank you so much for having me. I love this idea. I love the whole idea of the Chicago Indian Arts, too.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So before we delve into books, I'd love to start about you. You were born in Rajasthan, America in early childhood, Stanford, 3 decades in advertising, MFA, and then a debut novel with which the world received the way it received The Henna Artist. I mean, when you look back at all of it, what surprises you the most?
I think the idea of people being so open to learning about another culture, to absorbing information that they had previously not known about or had misperceptions about, and being able to change their framework around that culture. So, when I was first told by my agent that she was sending this out for publishers to consider, and she wouldn't do it until she really felt the book could become a bestseller, until I had done enough revisions to do that. But she said to me, "We have a blessing and a curse with this book." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "The Henna Artist is like nothing that those publishers have seen in the last 10, 12, 20 years.
Yeah.
So that is a good thing. However, it's also a bad thing because publishers don't like to take a chance on something that hasn't already been in the marketplace and
Course.
shown them that it can succeed." And so I was not sure whether readers were going to understand the larger context of my book. And that was the idea that India was a different place than maybe they had either learned about or thought of or even visited before.
Right.
That maybe they needed a much larger, a deeper understanding of
Right.
what that country and culture were about. And so I had no idea whether we would sell the book. I didn't know whether anybody would respond, but the positive response to it has been so surprising and so pleasantly surprising.
Wow. This is amazing. I mean, but I can tell you as a reader, and maybe I'm a little biased, I would have had no doubt because the way it's formed, it just changes how you see things around. And I think it is also an education of sorts for people. So I see your publisher's perspective, but as a reader I can tell you, like, anyone who picks it up cannot put it down. It's beautiful. So when I moved here from India, something shifted in me, and it took a long time to understand. I was in my 20s when I started. I think very quickly the question moves from who am I to how am I being seen? How am I being read? What rooms am I in? And you kind of start self editing. Part of your growing up here and in different places is fitting in. And as I was reading The Henna Artist, that immigrant in me, that person who's made that journey, that woman in me, there were so many, even though our circumstances were drastically different, I could continue to relate with that. So as I look at her character, especially in the book, when you were writing, when you were going at it, was it that Hari's return is not so much of a danger, but it's all these forts she's built for herself and she's curating them? Was that the intention you were going at it? You knew it?
Yes, I think that was a very perceptive comment on your part because it has become so automatic for Lakshmi when we first meet her in 1955 in Jaipur to code switch and to cater to her clientele without even realizing that what she's doing is changing her humanity.
Yeah.
She is letting go of this idea that maybe she could be a healer to all kinds of people and letting the idea of money and security and having a house of her own that nobody can push her out of. She is making that the paramount concern of her life. And of course, as you keep reading the book and you get to the end, you are going to realize that she will understand that maybe all of that curating that she has done about her life has really been detrimental to her as a human being, as somebody who cares about people and just wants to help them heal. And so she will go back to that as her main purpose in life.
Wow. I mean, I what you said just now was very, very impactful. Like curating our humanity. I never thought of it from this particular angle, but that's true. Like we start when we are editing ourselves, that's ultimately what we are doing. Wow, beautiful. Thank you. You've mentioned that in Lakshmi, you see parts of yourself as well as your mom. The resilient spirit, her beautiful features are your mom's, and the way she navigates systems comes from your experience in the corporate world. I'm curious on seeing this duality as well as this alignment in from two people into one play out. Like walk us through that.
So, as you probably know, the henna artist started out because I was spending time with my mother in India for the first time in 4 decades. I just had not wanted to go back to India because when I first came to the States in the 1960s, the perception of India was so negative
Of
that
course.
all I was replayed were scenes of poverty in India,
Right.
or people would ask me about arranged marriages in particular and why was India so backward? Why were
Right.
they still a third world country?
Right.
And, that wasn't my perception of India growing up there. I had everything I could want. I
Exactly.
never wanted for anything. And so I couldn't understand this difference in perspective. And it made me very shy and kind of embarrassed
Of course.
talking about India. But of course, none of us can escape our heritage. We can't escape our ethnic traditions. We cannot escape who we are and who we were born. I can't escape the fact that I'm a woman and I think, in different ways than a man does and
Of
all of
course.
that. So I think that ultimately, the book became not just about a woman like my mother in 1950s who didn't have as much agency as my mother had always made sure I had, but a woman who could, like we were saying earlier, curate her life so that she could gain agency and she could have an independence of sorts at the same time that India is gaining her independence and her right to govern herself. So Lakshmi is basically learning how to govern herself.
Of course.
My mother, of course, didn't have that luxury.
Yeah.
And she was born into a patriarchal system. She was married into a patriarchal system. And she was trying to do everything she could to work within that patriarchal system.
Right.
But when we came to the United States, she had that idea in her head that she saw American women being able to have agency, being able to have the ability to say, I like this, I don't like that, I want to do this, I don't want to do that, in a way that she never did.
Right.
And so she thought, well, I only have the one daughter, and I can make sure that she gets to say all of that, that she gets to make up her own mind about life.
Right.
So Lakshmi starts off, I think, when we think about her as a 15-year-old getting married, as a 17-year-old leaving her marriage, and so on, back then she is more like my mother. But ultimately, as she goes through life and gains more control over her own capabilities, over her own way to present herself and to earn money for herself, I think that that is more of what I was able to garner and what I experienced in the corporate world. And in the corporate world, I worked for large corporations, and then I had my own business for 20 years. So I understood when Lakshmi is dealing with a difficult patron, a difficult customer, somebody who wants or expects more than she is willing to give, how she should navigate that, how she should maybe make them think that she's giving them what they want when actually she is giving them what she
What she wants.
wants to give them.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is this is so fascinating. Like everything that you've said, I relate to it on a personal level so much. Things that you said about how India is perceived, what's happening in that worldview, and from the time like you're talking about, like 1960s to later, I think we are very thankful to everyone who's proceeded because they've built a foundation that now that view is slightly shifting. I wouldn't say the worldview is completely shifted towards India. I think India has to work a lot harder than many other places because of the stereotypes that it has associated. But all these things you mentioned, they kind of become the soul and the mission of why this foundation is existing, why I associated with it, with Jigger, because that is the lack we were seeing. It's so beautiful that you put that in this way. And the second thing I felt was the generation that preceded us, like what your mom was dealing with, what your mother was dealing with in that arena, that was not hers by choice. The fact that she created a completely different one for you, we're thankful to the generation that came before us because I don't know if I would have had that courage in their shoes. I have the courage I have because of what they did. But to have that courage, to have that dream, that openness is spectacular. It's just amazing to see.
I always thought it was my father who was creating all these opportunities for me. And in a way, yes, my father, has a PhD. He's always been very conscious of a good college education and what that means to your future. So he insisted that my brothers and I, of course, go to Ivy League colleges or very stellar private colleges. And we all ended up doing that. But beyond that, my father really wanted me to get married and to have children and have a very secure job. And I thought, why? Why does he want me to be this person when my mother doesn't even want me to spend time with her in the kitchen? My
Exactly.
father would, yeah, my father would say, go help your mother in the kitchen. And I, very reluctantly went to the kitchen. I was never interested in cooking. It wasn't something that I enjoyed doing. So I would come to the kitchen. My mother would say, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, Dad sent me to help you. She said, I don't need your help. I need you to go back and get your homework done and get into a good college and have a career
Yeah.
in the way that I didn't get to.
Oh,
So she was constantly pushing me towards this other sort of life that I could have. And
right.
it's the one I was naturally much more attracted to
Attracted to.
anyway.
Yeah.
Like even when I was, let's say, a little girl, like let's say I'm 6, 7 years old in India, I never asked for a doll that I could pretend I was bathing or feeding or diapering. I wasn't interested ever in that stuff. I wanted to design clothes. I wanted to design jewelry. I wanted to, do all of these other kinds of things. And my mother, I think, saw that in a way that mothers can see their children more clearly. And because they spend more time with them. And I think she thought that girl is never going to be happy, raising a whole bunch of kids and not having a career. That's not going to be her.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until my 50s that she confessed that she's the one who fought at various points in my life when my father would have wanted to take a safe path for me. And she fought him and said, no, she's not going to be happy doing that. She's going to be much happier if you just let her be who she is.
Wow. I was laughing earlier because it's so relatable, and I'm lucky to have similar parents as well. And the way you described your father, my dad was very similar, very progressive for their times. And my mom was throughout a career woman, and I was child very similar to you. I didn't own any dolls. I had zero interest. I was scraping my knee, climbing the tree, and like completely out there to be a tomboy. And interestingly, I see that in my daughter too. Like she is as rough as you can get, and but it's amazing what we carry from our mothers and the battles they fight for us to be where we are. This is
Yeah.
beautiful, lovely.
And I'll tell you a couple of other surprising things about my mother. And I inserted them into the henna artist and in my subsequent novels as well through other characters. So even though my mother was always encouraging me to be this independent spirit, there was a part of me that was always shy, a part that did not enjoy parties, didn't want to be socializing with people, just wanted to sit in the corner and paint and draw. That's really what I wanted to do. I'm an artist.
Yeah.
So my mother would try to push me towards more of a gregarious personality. And for example, when there were school dances, I didn't even want to go to my school dances when I was in junior high and high school. But my mother would take me shopping and she would direct me towards the dresses that I felt were very risque. Like she would have me put on a
Love
halter
it.
top dress, and I would say, Mom, my shoulders are showing, and we're not allowed to wear halter tops at school and all of that. My mom would be like, honey, you have such a cute little body. That will be so good on you. And then when I was 18, because I could talk to my mother about anything, I said, I had just come home for Thanksgiving from Stanford. And I said, Mom, there's a guy there, and I think he's my first boyfriend. And I think I would really like to sleep with him. And so she said, okay, we're going to go to the doctor. We're going to get you some birth control pills because this is the time in your life when you can experiment and you can, be with many different people. I just don't want you to get pregnant. It's not a
That's
good idea ever to be pregnant before you are married. And so these are the ways in which I think my mother was pushing me towards that much more feminist, independent sort of life that Lakshmi ends up living. But I, in some ways, had to be pushed towards that. I wasn't naturally inclined to go that way.
But it's amazing like how she had the foresight to kind of keep grooming. And I think as mothers, sometimes it's that kind of battle we are fighting, that we know you just have to go in that direction, and it's okay with that little nudge. That's amazing. I think she deserves a whole podcast of her own. She's such a fabulous woman. I would love to talk more about her. So, coming to your trilogy, it hands sort of attention to each character and to the main character in every novel, like the traps that they each have built. For Lakshmi, it's the armor that she built around. For Malik, it's the institution he's desperate to become a part of, and then the gradual moral erosion, things that he sees, and what becomes of it. For Radha, I feel it was all of it and more because she was then placed out of India into Paris. Tell me about that geography change and what did you expect that character to kind of grow as when you change the geography? Like, does the baggage change, become easier, or you can never evade it?
I think that through Radha, I'm actually talking about the immigrant experience that so many books talk about, but they talk about it in the setting of the new country that they have adopted. I wanted to talk about it in the sense that Radha has been to a different country, lived in France for a while, and now is coming back to India, and sort of, differences that she is noticing in her life and the way that she thinks about things and the way she's raising her girls also.
Yeah.
And so I think that yes, Radha is uh, exemplifying what happens to those of us who are separated from our family, separated from our environment, our culture. It just releases something in you, that restriction that you were born under, this set of rules that you had to follow all of those years, you realize don't hold in another country, in another environment. And so you learn what the people of those environment, what women like you do in that environment when they are faced with certain issues. And you think, well, there's no reason why I couldn't think like them or do like them. Why would I have to keep following this old precept?
Rule, yeah.
And I think that is exactly what Radha is exemplifying, definitely. I also wanted to, in The Perfumist of Paris, show that we all have the ability to grow and learn from our mistakes. And Radha made a huge mistake in The Henna Artist. She was young, she was
Yeah.
impetuous, she was upset with Lakshmi as the older sister for not giving her enough credit, being a smart girl. And so she sort of rebels. And when she gets to Paris, and she's married to a Parisian now, she has two little girls in that culture. And she finds, she's still rebellious. She has that personality, but she also learns how much Lakshmi had to give up in
Right.
order to take care of her. And
Right.
I think with that newfound understanding, she reaches another level of growth that I think we're constantly seeking. I don't think we grow up all at once.
No.
We grow up in stages of our lives when we encounter something really big happening in our life, like the baby that she gave up in The Henna Artist. And now she is having to deal with this living being who is now 18 years old and
Yeah.
finds her. She is having to come up with another process of dealing with what happened in her past. And I think that we are always going through something like that. Every major obstacle in our life presents an opportunity for us to grow from the person we used to be.
Fascinating. Because yeah, I mean, when you say that, the growth is spiral, and as you were saying it, I was like, that's true. If Radha showed the level of maturity in the henna artist, it wouldn't have, like, it would have become so formulaic. And here now it's like a journey. That's why the trilogy reads like you feel that continuity, you feel you've grown with these three people over a period of time. Amazing. Love it.
And
Yes, please.
that's something that you really picked up on when you read the entire trilogy, is you read that growth pattern. You read
Yes.
that the characters are changing throughout this 18 years that
Yes.
take place.
Yes, it was like I still think of it and I get goosebumps as I read through that. Coming to 6 Days in Bombay and the legendary Amrita Shergill. How did you come to, like, her, and what was it about her personality that you had to build and create beyond what's available in the history? She's such a fascinating figure in herself.
Yeah. And I first encountered her paintings in New Delhi at the Modern Museum, at Modern Gallery of Art, I think it's called. And it was just fascinating to me that her work really spoke to me personally. She was always portraying women in various situations, various environments. And it seemed to me that she really understood how trapped maybe some women feel in sort of a lower caste setting or a lower economic setting, how they feel trapped in the lack of agency they had in determining who their partner in life was going to be. She just seemed to capture that so beautifully. And I thought, well, who is she? Why have I never heard of her? And so I started doing research on her. And what I found the most fascinating, and I find this fascinating almost about any woman who is like this, is that she came out into the world and said, I'm talented. Watch out, world. I'm going to follow my own path.
True.
I don't care what my parents say. I don't care what the art world says. I don't care what any of you people say. I'm going to paint what I want to paint. And she painted female nudes at a time when women weren't allowed to paint nudes,
No.
even though men had been allowed to paint nudes forever. And so, I admire that so much about her, that she is somebody who could just come out of the womb and say, here I am, take me as I am. I
Exactly.
think that that takes courage, and most of us don't have that kind of courage. We're not born with that.
So rightly said. And she's so iconic. Like some people, like you said, they cannot be, they cannot be put in a particular bucket and said that's where you belong. Like they create their own and they go from there. And the way the book deals with it and works around, it's just a super fascinating book. I gave it to a friend. It's been one of those books where I've been gifting it to people as well because I really enjoyed reading it so much, and it's on the list of books for my husband to read. He's an avid reader as well, so it's our permanent bookshelf.
That's excellent. And then with each book, I'm sure you have realized that what I'm doing also is giving people a different historical perspective of
Yes.
India. So I
Yes.
want people to know that India also produced these iconoclast women. They
Exactly.
weren't, they didn't always just come from Europe or from the
No.
West. That we also had women who were willing to champion
Right.
women's rights, women's education,
Right.
all of these things that Ms. Naidu was doing at the time,
Yes.
and the Bollywood starlets were doing at the time,
Yeah.
running their own studios and so on. And I love bringing all of that into my books. When I find out about a time period and I can bring that into the book, as I did in 6 Days in Bombay in the year 1937, I feel so empowered to educate people about another aspect of India that they didn't know anything about.
That is amazing. And I mean, to do it through a very interesting story, I'm sure leads to several Wikipedia and, research that, oh my God, this was happening. Because to your point, India, there's a favorite narrative that usually the world builds around it. And then we have people like yourself who kind of shift it completely on its head. They spin it that that's not what you know. Let's tell you about how it works. It's great work, and I just wish it keeps on continuing. The other thing that's very amazing about Trilogy in particular is craft coded as the centerpiece. Henna is central to the professional context in that book, but also in selfhood and a center part of the house that Lakshmi is building, which is her authored identity. Perfume being a layered memory in The Perfumist. Each practice is like it's not a common simple thing, a profession for the sake of it. I'm very curious to know what how do you put that there, and how do you kind of move from it not just being a symbolism but so beautifully intertwined with the core of the story.
I'm always trying to find professions where women could excel in the time periods that I'm writing about, and professions that might have been open to them, and how they might have carried their artistic value in it to a much higher level. And so I'm picking and choosing the kinds of arts that I think that could have applied to that time period. So, for example, we have the henna that a woman in the 1950s could have done to make a living. And in fact, many girls and women today make a living doing the henna. And then in every household, there are always these herbal remedies. Every South Asian household has their ones that they pass down. So I thought, now that is something that a woman, once she becomes really good at it and knows a lot about household remedies, she could also make a living doing something like that.
Right.
And then in The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, I'm pointing out all of the many ways in which jewelry has been influenced by the Mughal tradition, by Jaipuri artisans, how uh, jewels are cut, gems are cut in Gujarat. It's very important for people to understand that a lot of the jewelry they wear probably had its genesis in some Indian design or Indian format or even in India itself. And the Queen of England is wearing crown that always has Indian jewels in it that were cut by, Indian jewelers.
Yeah.
So I think that the world needs to understand that so much of the beauty of this world comes from India. Of course, in 6 Days in Bombay, it was very easy for me to pick art because it's founded on Amrita Shergill's paintings. And so from that, I'm trying to show that even what a woman chooses to paint and what she chooses to convey in her paintings is something that she can do, and she can claim agency through that. In my fifth book, which will come out in March of next year, it's all about Kathak dance. And Kathak is yeah, and I've always admired Kathak dance. I think it takes so much training, so much energy, and I believe it's a precursor to ballet.
Yes.
Although I don't know if the French would, argue with
Agree with that.
but but I think that that dance is such an important part of Indian art. And what I wanted to show through that book, and hopefully it will be conveyed through the story, is that for about 90 years, women and girls in India were not allowed to dance Kathak because it was associated with courtesans.
Yeah.
And the only reason that it was all of a sudden considered verboten is because of the British. It had nothing to do with Indians themselves. It had to do with the fact that the courtesans had helped finance the 1957 Sepoy Rebellion. And so the British needed to penalize them in some way. And one of the ways to do that was to take this very old profession of patrons who would commit to a woman within the quota and would stay with her for a long time and would support her children and so on, but to denigrate that profession down into a common prostitute.
Yeah.
And that is why then Indian families would not allow their girls to dance the same dance as the prostitutes, or as the courtesans, which was Kathak. So I just want the world to understand where
Things change. Yeah.
how things change, and also how colonization can really impact the historical traditions of a culture.
Absolutely.
And how when India achieved her independence, she reclaimed that culture. And she said, no, you don't get to take that away from us anymore. Now we are taking it back.
Yes. This is so fascinating. I cannot wait to read the book. I'm already hooked to it. Don't mind me if I'm sending you, requests again and again when it comes out, because Kathak is, to your point, such a fascinating, precise dance, like are so many Indian dance forms. And this piece of history that you're talking about is so largely unknown. And like, to your point, the Western lenses and the lenses that get amplified just keep on repeating the same trope that they've heard in over and over in different places and areas. And the fact that these things come out and this is the author's voice, I think it is such a necessary conversation to have, and I'm so glad we are talking about these things. I want more and more people to hear about it, our audience to go and find out more about these kind of things. Really amazing. Coming to your four books, and we've briefly touched upon this earlier. Out of your key characters, which one do you feel has the most you in it from a personality, from a human perspective?
I think it's a toss up between Lakshmi and Sona.
Okay.
I already, sort of alluded to the fact that so much of my business dealings are in Lakshmi's business dealings. But Sona, in the sense that, as I told you, my mother had to push me to become a much more outgoing kind of person and to take chances. And I think that Sona is being pushed by Mira, the famous painter, to take chances in a way that she never would have had she not had somebody push her. And I would not have taken chances had it not been for my mother pushing me. So I think that both of those characters really resonate with me personally. I tend to be cautious. I tend to, look ahead, plan ahead. I do a lot of that. And for these two women, at certain moment in their life, when they completely abandon all of that caution and go after what they really want, oh, that is so powerful. That feels like something I want to do. And I have done at various times in my life. And it is such a freeing and powerful emotion.
Emotion. That's amazing. That's really uh, good to know what happens behind the scenes, because when you read the books that touch you so much, it's inevitable that part of the author is living in somewhere there. So I'm fascinated to hear this. You've described your 10 years of immense work before The Henna Artist came out. You've described it as overnight success. For the world that we are living in right now, which is all about instant gratification, 30-second reels, quick, attention spans, I'm pretty sure that journey was gruesome. It was hard. It was like there were days which were not as pleasant. Before the pen even touched the paper, walk me through what was that time like? How did you keep going?
Well, first of all, I never intended to become a writer. It wasn't something that I, from a very young age thought, oh, I'm going to be a writer someday. I'm going to write stories and everything. So it was a brand new kind of profession for me. And I am very lucky in that I chose a partner in life who supports everything I want to do. Emotionally. And so he was very much in favor of me learning how to write these stories about India that I kept telling him growing up in India, what my parents wanted me to do versus what I really wanted to do, and all of this kind of thing. And he just kept encouraging me to keep writing them down. So when I finally started writing in this MFA program, I was still working. I was running my own advertising agency, and I could take on as many projects as I wanted so that I had time to write and read and do everything that I needed to do in my master's program of creative writing. And, the economy had slowed down then, so that helped me a lot in terms of having extra time on my hands. And so I finished the thesis for the henna artist, and then I stopped because my mother got sick, and then she needed my help. And then she died, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then I had a instructor in my MFA program call and say, you really need to start working on that book again. So I worked with her for the next year and a half to 2 years. She sends it off to her agent. Her agent calls me, and I think now I'm going to get published for sure. I have an agent. I thought that was the key to getting published, but it's not. That is just one more step. You're closer to it. And she said, I'm not letting this out of my sight until we can make it a best-selling novel, because nobody knows you in the publishing world and they don't like to take chances on things they don't know. So she forced me basically to make lots of changes to the novel. And I have to give her a lot of kudos for working with me to make those changes because I didn't want to. Like a lot of emerging writers, I thought, well, I'm done. I've done 8 drafts already. Of course, I am absolutely done with this novel. How dare she tell me I am not there yet? But she had 30 years of experience selling books to publishers. And so Emma. Emma Sweeney is her name. And she said, yeah, you're just not there yet. I can't let the book out. And so finally, she gave me a list of professional editors after I'd done 15 revisions. And she said, okay, call these people and have them take you to the finish line. And of course, then I had these professional editors I was working with. They were sending me all kinds of new revisions. And I just thought, oh my God, this never ends. This cycle never ends. And at one point, I absolutely gave up. On my 8th year, I gave up. I said, this is ridiculous. I am not working on this novel anymore. Look, I've got bills. I'm working on my advertising and marketing. I've got to get this stuff out the door for a client. Let me just forget all about the novel writing business. But then a year later, I see this novel in my desk drawer and I just think about all the time I have spent on it, all these ideas that I have imbued the characters with, all of this idea about my mother and this alternate life that I could imagine for her in the 1950s. And I thought, Alka, you just have to finish this. You have to get through with this. Maybe when you do one more pass, you can send it to Emma and she will say, okay, she's going to send it out. So I did one more pass. It took me a year to do that pass, actually, because I kept rewriting and reading and revising and reading and revising and so on. Finally, it was my 30th draft that I sent off to Emma. And I said, Emma, it's been 9 years since I first started working on this novel. And if you don't want to send it to somebody, then please let me know that I can send it somewhere else. I'll just get myself a new agent. She said, all right, all right, all right. Don't freak out. I'll send it. And that's when we got the contract from HarperCollins. And so what I like to tell emerging writers when they tell me I've already been through this 2 or 3 times in my novel, I just say you're not even close to being done.
No.
Because most people think if I can write a sentence or if I get A's in English, of course I should be able to write a novel. But it's a skill that is learned like anything else in your life, whether you want to learn how to bind books, whether you want to learn how to drive a truck, whether you want to, learn how Amazon shipping works or whatever. It takes time to learn any new skill.
Right.
And Malcolm Gladwell, I think, took back his idea that you need 10,000 hours in order to become an expert at something. But I still believe that you need at least 10,000 hours to get good at something, to get really good at it.
Right.
And if you want a best-selling book, then spend the time to make it right and work with people who can help you make it right. Right. So I worked with so many editors and my agent and all of those people in my master's program. I had a lot of people helping me. You cannot write a book on your own.
Yeah.
I just had, okay, so I'll just tell you this. I just had an emerging writer write to me today and say, I'm embarking on my first novel and I'm wondering if you would be my mentor. Well, you know what? That is a really hard thing to say yes to because I can't help anybody all by myself. They need a whole village of people to help them. And that's going to have to be professors, and it's going to have to be editors, and it's going to have to be an agent who's really on their side and knows what to do. So I just think that, emerging writers need to have more patience and more persistence to keep making that novel better and better and better until somebody finally says, I can't put this down.
This is like a masterclass. And you're right. I was about to ask you what would be your message for the emerging writers. And it couldn't have been put in a better way. And the fact that it's interesting that you came to the same thing, that grit, persistence, patience, all are the key. These are the kind of things we heard from Triti as well. And I think it says something about all the really strong, accomplished writers that we love reading, that it's not an overnight situation. It doesn't work that way. And I think speaking to the generation that you all are speaking to today, it's a very important message that goes out. And I would be thrilled for people in the room on our Lit Fest day to hear this, that 30 drafts, 10 years. I mean, that requires another level of patience. And there's so much to learn from there, to not just give up. And at the same time, it's not that these are 10 years in isolation. You have an ad agency that you're running during that time. You're running a full life during that time. And this is happening as a centerpiece as well. So I have to say, I don't know how you did it. Like this, I don't think I would have ever had that level of patience, but it's inspirational to me for what I want to pursue and for so many people who are in my shoes, who are in the shoes of being emerging writers, that craft takes time. The 10,000 hours thing, it's not a joke. Like put the time in and it comes out. Brilliantly said. And thank you for sharing that with us.
Absolutely. And I want to say one other thing to emerging writers as well. Like, I could not have written these books in my 20s. I couldn't have written them in my 30s or my 40s because I hadn't lived enough of a life. By my 40s, I could have started in my 40s, but I didn't start until my 50s. But a lot of young people want to write and become fabulous writers at a young age.
Yes.
It happens very rarely. We all know people that it's happened to.
Sure.
But to gain the gravitas of loss, accepting new identities, the idea of love and what it means to really love someone, these kinds of things only come to us with experience. So I actually feel that I am at the perfect time in my life right now to write, not in my 20s or 30s. I could not have written these things in my 20s and 30s. I had no idea about life until I got much older.
It is actually, this brings up such a fascinating thing you said just now, because I agree, and myself included in this pool of people. There feels to be this rush, this urgency to do things very early, young. If you've not done it, you're not a success. But I never thought of it from the angle that to be an artist, especially of your caliber, that experience, that loss, that experience of every part of life is so critical. And I think in a society that tends to be so ageist very quickly, this is a beautiful message for people to know and understand that no, not everything is meant to be in your 20s and 30s. Some things happen, and it's not just growing old, it is growing with that experience and then having the sensibility of bringing it to life. Oh, this is such a powerful message. I'd keep going on it in my head.
And also, I want to tell people you're not a failure just because you haven't had some mind blowing success in your 20s. Oh my God, you are living a life. Life is hard enough without setting up this enormous goal for yourself that you
Yeah.
have to be famous now.
Yeah.
Listen, just life is hard enough. Just go day by day.
True. Such a powerful thought. Yeah. So over 1,000 conversations with readers across the world. What did you see in those spaces, and especially when you went to these massive literature festivals, places you've been across? What rooms felt meaningful to you? Like, and it's something that we are learning and we want to build. So tell us about that.
I found that the reason that I do so many book clubs and the reason that a lot of authors don't want to do book clubs is that, they feel it's not valuable. But I always find so much value in talking one-on-one with people about the book, just like Sarvation, just like you and I are doing now, where you're able to give me insights into what you got out of the book that I didn't even, think about or know anything about. The places that I find I have, that have been the most meaningful are those book clubs where I'm just talking to like 8 people at a time. And each of them is offering me up what they liked about the characters, what they didn't like about the book. They can tell me anything. And I will share things in those more private conversations, as I call them, that I cannot share with 1,000 people, all at once in in an auditorium.
Right.
So that has been really meaningful. The letters I get from people, the emails I get, the personal letters I get, um, from people I've never met in my life, halfway around the world, or even just from next door. Somebody writes me a letter from my own hometown. They're telling me that the books have helped them through hard times, cancer, the death of a loved one, a heartache that won't go away, anything like that. And I never ever thought, wow, that is what books do for a lot of people. They are their companions through a particularly difficult time in their life. So a lot of people in these book groups will tell me that kind of thing because it is a more private setting. They will also tell me that when they're in a signing line and I'm at a festival, and they will take that opportunity since they're right in front of me to let me know that their mother died right before they picked up this book, and it is what helped them through so much of that sorrow. Uh, Oh my gosh, I just start crying. Like I'm tearing up right now just thinking about it because I never thought I would be in a position of writing books that are that meaningful to people, that are actually helping them through a serious illness or a time in their life when they feel they need that comfort. So it's a powerful thing, writing. It requires, I think, a lot of thought and understanding human beings, how they relate to one another. And I think what I want people to take away from these books is that we are all related in all kinds of ways that we don't even imagine.
Yes.
And that relationship is important to foster and grow.
So meaningful. And I have to share this with you. I had read Henna Artist after my mom passed, and it was my parents passed very unexpectedly. And later I picked up the book, I finished it, and then I read the personal story as to how did the book come about. And it just like that's why I think my attachment to it was so much deeper because it felt that even though the story was completely different, that someone somewhere feels this loss. And it's personal when you read things like that. And books, to your point, yeah, they are the companions. I remember everything that when I pick up a book, I would remember what was happening at that time in my life. And I don't think I have to say this like it that's not what you may feel from your perspective, but not every author can do that. So I think someone has to be as special as you for so many people across the world to feel that personal connect and pull because it is coming from those heartstrings. And I'm just thankful for you for writing this.
Thank you so much. It's been such a lovely interview. Thank you. This is lovely. I hope that your viewers or your listeners will get as much out of it.
I hope so too. Chicago Indian Arts, we started this because, Jigger kept on asking a question that had no good answer. Where does someone in America go to encounter India in its full civilizational range, just like what you've written? Literature, poetry, spoken word, dance, theater, visual arts, wildlife, photography, fashion, textiles, food, cinema, all of it treated with the seriousness and depth that a 5,000-year-old civilization deserves. A space where India is not reduced, not explained, not performed for outside approval, but simply fully present, We are non-political and non-religious by design. We want India to be encountered the way your books encounter it, with precision, with emotional honesty, and with full complexity it deserves. The Chicago Indian Literature Festival is on May 30th. It's our first public answer to the question that he had been searching for. And having this conversation with you as a part of how we can define that room sounds like it means so much more than I can ever tell you. So, Alka Joshi, internationally best-selling author, Forbes Honoree, and a writer whose work has reached readers in 30 languages across the world. If you've not begun your Jaipur trilogy, please do so now. And this is Chicago Indian Arts Podcast. I'm Sarveshi Shukla. Our Lit Fest is on May 30th. Details at chicagoindianarts.org. Thank you for listening. And thank you, Alka, for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.